Hey, listeners, thanks for tuning into the podcast. I just want to take a moment to mention the podcast sponsor, retrogamestore.com.au. Head over there for all your Game Boy refurbish and repair needs. Screens, shells, buttons, and all the bits and pieces. And there's a complete custom build made to order service as well. Also, plenty more retro gaming goodness like video cables, display stand and power supplies, controls, etc. And you can add the code PixelPie at checkout to get 10% off your order. Also, take a moment to say if you enjoyed this episode and haven't already, give it a subscribe or follow and a review where you can. And maybe you want to recommend the Pixel Pie podcast to anyone you know that would enjoy it. That'd be really appreciated. So thanks for listening, and now let's get on with the show.
Hi, this is JoeBleeps, and you are listening to the Pixel Pie podcast.
G'day, Joe. JoeBleeps. How you doing, buddy?
Hi, I'm all right. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
No, thanks for coming, mate. We were discussing just sort of a little bit before the episode. I'll try and get all of my sort of fanboyness out of it. I know that you're a very humble guy, but your name comes up a lot when I talk to Game Boy modders that have been around a bit. And I think a lot of people sort of owe just a little bits and pieces, a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of technical knowledge to JoeBleeps. And I'm really, really stoked to have you here to chat with me and to share a bit more, Joe, with us.
Oh, thank you. It is always strange when I hear my name mentioned with things like that, because no matter which end of the spectrum I'm at, I've always felt like a bit of a noob, like a bit like a learner with all of these things. And I still always feel like I'm going that way. Like when I first started off and I'm hitting people up for advice, I felt like I was kind of, in the presence of all these people who knew what they were doing. And then now I've been doing it for ages. There's all people coming out with like amazing new mods and creations and ideas that are way beyond what I can do. So whichever way things go, I always feel like I'm happily on the back foot with it. So it's funny having my name mentioned as, influencing other people, but it's nice, it's a nice feeling.
I think it's a really, really commendable attitude to have too, to always be in that position where I don't know everything and I'm always willing to learn, and I can always look to others and sort of go, well, that's really cool. Because that, to me, that tells me that you actually appreciate it for what it is, not what it can do for you. We see that in many aspects of life. There's a lot of, it's almost human nature that we want to be an athlete so that the crowd loves us and, we can sign jerseys. But when someone plays for the love of the game and then gets to that point where they're doing camps for kids and things like that, they give them back. So I really appreciate that sort of humble attitude. Now, you've got a few aspects. Most of what I get about someone is from their Instagram. There's a few aspects of Joe that I would like to cover. I'll also ramble them off. I've just taken a few notes here. Freestyle skating, chiptune, retro tech mods, which it doesn't specifically point at Game Boys, which obviously has been a large part of JoeBleeps, but it opens it up to other retro tech, toys, and then down the bottom now I've put Game Boy. So and then when I go through, I look at stuff, I'm like, say you're early 40s, and I'm like, look at this guy with the Boba Fett, the OG Boba Fett, and the Master Universe Grayskull reissue, and just all this gnarly stuff that kind of like 12-year-old me would have just. There's a picture here with a bunch of your don't take offense, musical mixing equipment, and there's a transformer there. What's his name? Soundwave. He's there. I was like, oh, this dude is living the dream. So let's kind of go into the.
I've just never really progressed being age 9, really.
just got a bigger budget.
I stopped and my body just got a little bit more worn out each year. But yeah, I stayed mentally about 9 since then. So I don't think I'm ever planning on changing from that either.
You have to grow old, but you don't have to grow up, Joe.
That's right. Yeah.
So let's go back a bit to sort of like, I guess 9-year-old Joe seems to be a key point where you. And sort of fill us in on as much as you want on like where it all started and what you were doing as a, where you grew up and how that affected your hobbies today.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a funny one because I was never really super into video games. Like, you know, loads of people I am friends with now who are into retro gaming and video games were like massively into it when they were younger. And I was never really that obsessed with it. I liked it. It was around and I played on it, but as with most things, I felt like I was no good at it, and I was always very hesitant. So if I was around at someone's house and they had a, you know, games console set up, I would happily sit and watch everyone else play rather than have a go and be really bad at it or whatever else. But at the same time, it was part of my childhood and part of my growing up. And the same with, like, you know, your Saturday morning TV and the music of the time and everything else. That nostalgia kind of takes you back to those happier, more innocent times. And there's definitely that sort of appeal to it. And also, you know, there were massive changes in gaming in general. Like, it was, you know, through the 80s, like from the start of the 80s to the end of the 80s, start of the 90s to the end of the 90s. I mean, there were massive giant steps taken in gaming. So things became a kind of retro feel quite quickly. You know, we compare it now to like some games that are coming out brand new compared to ones that were on the Xbox 360. And then you look at, you know, the sort of leaps within the 90s and early 2000s in the same amount of years. There were bigger changes. So it was exciting times. And it was nice to latch on to the older stuff. And then there was the arcade. And then when it kind of reached about, I mean, I'm leaping all over the place, but I'll start to go a bit more chronological. In a bit. But, you know, it was like when it reached around the point of the Dreamcast where you could genuinely have like actual arcade games at home. It's like, there's been lots of different things that really kind of got me excited during my time of gaming. But if I go right back, the first kind of video games that we had in the UK were largely like home computers. We didn't have a lot in the way of the consoles like in America, you know. So we had first computer we had as a family was an Amstrad CPC 6128. And it had the same sort of games as everyone with the Speckies and Commodores, and everyone was convinced their platform was the best and all that. But, you know, it's one of those, like, you just got whatever your parents had bought and that was what you had, really. There were very few kids who could actually read up and make the choice and decide, oh, I'm going to get that one. It was usually just, you know, what was there. And even right from back then, like, we had this random plugin for that called a Multiface 2. And it was like you could put a disc in or load up a game. And if there was a key point when it's just loaded and you press a button, and then you swap the disc around and you could make copies of games and things like that. Wowzers. So even right from my very beginnings of using gaming hardware, there was that aspect of tinkering with them, of being able to circumvent things or do things slightly differently. And that, I always found that almost just as fascinating as playing on the games themselves. And then as we got older, it was the Amiga was the massive one. When I was at high school and all my friends had those. And again, getting huge stacks of blank discs and swapping games here, there, and everywhere.
The Amiga's a funny one, isn't it? Like, it was definitely a step, like similar. I was probably around grade 8 or probably at grade 9 at high school when the Amiga, a friend of mine had an Amiga. I was just the other day, I was listening to a podcast. I'm talking about the game Barbarian. And if you kind of if we did it right, you actually did this like spinning sword thing and cut the head off, and a little troll come out and kick the head off the screen. And I was like, I totally forgot about that. And he was sort of saying, it looks stupid now, but in the day, like, that was a gaming achievement. And I really, the Amiga is one of those things. It's that real bridge. I mean, the first time I heard of the internet was a buddy of mine, was a bit older. We used to go and hang out with. I mean, I had my license, and he was on the internet communicating with people in the other part of the world on an Amiga. So the Amiga was that. The space shuttle was around and all sorts of stuff.
Well, the thing I loved about the Amiga was the homebrew scene. I mean, I never made games, but I love like, if you wanted to get a new game, you were spending a lot of money on that game, which is why you ended up, you know, with kids at school swapping discs and you know, that sort of thing. But although we had these copied games and things like that, for me, it was always like you could go out and buy a magazine that would have like these cover discs on it, and it'd have hundreds of these homebrew games that people have made themselves. And I'd just love playing those. I'd just sit for hours on these really random little indie games that people had just made in their bedrooms. And there was just a huge wealth of those sort of games on the Amiga that you could explore.
It's amazing that the industry survived as long as it did. I mean, there's the whole kind of like console wars, Atari crash and all that sort of stuff. You can go on about that stuff for ages. But in reality, in Europe, because of that home computer market, it wasn't as such an impact. Everyone just sort of kept tapping away, go 220 and, poke and prod and all that sort of stuff. And it kind of kept going. But the stories of just going to boot sales and just, a quid for a game and a quid for a game, it's like, how the hell did it just last as long? There must have been so many little software houses and developers that just came up and disappeared. I think about that what's that show on Netflix, the one where Bandersnatch. Did you watch that?
Oh yeah.
And it's a very typical, like, here's a dude, he kind of looks a bit like a record kind of label guy, and he just gets a bunch of young programmers, keeps them full of coffee and cigarettes, and they're just in there like punching away, knocking out games. Yeah. And I assumed that's pretty much what it was like.
It's yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of those industries where people are in it for the love of doing what they do. And although you can dream of getting rich, it's like with being in music and everything else, you have to make it really big to really get those successes. You have to do it because you love doing it.
Yeah. It's funny, before you're talking about that massive sort of change in technology, like if you look at, say, from 89 when the Game Boy came out, 10 years after that, 99, where the world was at in gaming. But then you sort of look at, say, the Wii U was released in 2012. 11 years later, the difference between a Wii U and a PS5 is phenomenal. Like there's massive steps. And that period was one of those steps where we went from the Game Boy screen of like a not even a front lit, kind of like hold it in the, where the lights got it, to whatever was in 99, like massive steps, Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you look at maybe PS3 to PS4 to PS5. I mean, it's largely the same games, arguably. They're just shinier and it loads quicker. But like you say, 89 to 99, you've got the difference between like the Game Boy and the Dreamcast.
Well, Marvel vs. Capcom on your couch.
Yeah.
That, like you said, arcade at home, phenomenal. Cool.
That was a really exciting moment for me, that when I realized, so I think it was like Hydro Thunder or something I saw playing on a demo kiosk in Toys R Us, and I was like, it's the arcade. Whereas, like, because a lot of games were based on, like home console games were very much about getting value for money, about having games that would last you hours and hours and hours, and the sort of quick fix arcade, it appealed to the sort of the sensibility of the sort of games I'd grown up playing. But also the fact that I could have that at home was that was exciting,
and not keep putting coins in the machine and just do it for hours and hours. What you could do in your bedroom with a Dreamcast would cost you like $100, or whatever, on a Saturday to get through a Metal Slug or whatever the game was that was just milking you. No worries. All right, let's sort of fast forward a little bit then to like, obviously, like I said, there's a lot of stuff you've got, like a Castle Grayskull. I'm going to assume, because the box is in such good shape, that's one of the reissue Grayskulls, is it?
Oh yeah, that's the new one. Yeah, I've got my original one from when I was a kid as well.
No way.
New one, I was like, with the new one, I was like, I saw it in the store, and I knew that they were scarce.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't need this, but if I don't buy it now, I might be there in a week's time scouring everywhere trying to find it fruitlessly. They had two in the store, and I thought, well, if I get it and I change my mind, I can probably sell it anyway, knowing full well that I wasn't going to sell it.
Yes.
And then I got it. And like I say, there were two in that store. And then I did a stock check on the store's website the other day, and they had like two left in the whole of the UK. So I was like, all right, that was the right shout.
Yeah. Did you unbox it, or is it sealed? Or?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
you play with it,
unboxed, set up, played with.
Oh, good.
It's got to be done.
I
think this is, this whole thing of having things boxed and sealed, I can understand, because it's that moment when you first get that thing, you buy it and bring it home from the store, or you unwrap it at Christmas, and it's that moment of having it in the box. And what we do is, we get our Star Wars toys at Christmas, we rip them out of the box, everything gets thrown away. We play with the toys for years, and we love the toys, but we've got that fondness for that untouchable moment of having the box. So I can see why people are obsessed with having all these things packaged in the box, and that moment, the packaging. And I'm guilty of it from time to time. I've got like an original fully boxed Game Boy that's exactly the same as the one I got when I was however old I was at the time when it first came out.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's not sealed. I've opened it up and, you know, got everything out, but I keep it in there just for that nostalgia. But I think I did go through a phase of obsessing over having box things and, you know, thinking about having these toys and keeping them in the packaging. And it's a strange thing, really, because you kind of living through your life denying yourself the joy of these items,
especially if it's sealed.
It's like you are denying yourself that, and then, you know, what's going to happen? You die, and it's all left there, and it's probably going to be dropped off at a charity shop, and that's that. And it's like, it's not like you take it with you, so you're only here for a certain amount of time, and you know, living in denial like that just seems random. It was one of those, like, I just had one of those moments of thinking, like, why am I sitting looking at this thing? Not just ripping it open and playing with it for a bit and having that bit of joy, and then moving on. So, and there's a different... I don't tend to do much with that sort of sealed games. And
there's a different type of attachment too. Like a little while back, my daughter and I went through a big Pokemon card phase, and we built up a bunch of folders and stuff and everything. And I bought one of the Champions Path Elite Trainer boxes, and like, in some of those, there's a Charizard that I know would go for about $1,000. So I bought this Elite Trainer box, and I was like, I'll just keep it. I'll leave it sealed. It cost $150, and I had no intention of ever opening it. And at some point, I'll sell it. I'm not opening it. And my daughter's like, let's open it. It might be in there. Because a buddy of mine, we bought him at the same time, and he got the Charizard, and he made like thousands of dollars off some of the cards he got. And I've had to take that thing and put it up on my shelf behind some other things and stash it away. And I haven't enjoyed it one bit.
Yeah. It goes up on display. You dust it now and again. And
not even that. It's behind like a bunch of big, like 8-inch Ninja Turtles and my Tetris box and all that stuff. It's hidden away. I don't want to see it. It actually reminds me of what really annoys me about that market, that buying to resell to like Pokemon cards kind of gave me a lot of joy to share with my daughter, but also kind of made me feel a little bit sick about the way people go about the business of buying and selling Pokemon cards. But it was stacks of fun. But I see what you mean. You buy it, you love it. If it stays in the box, and me personally, I am so like pessimistic that anything that someone's trying to sell me is sealed in box, never been opened. I'm just so skeptical.
Because you can reseal things so neatly now.
Absolutely. We've been to the moon, dude. You tell me you can't put a bit of plastic bag around a box and tell me it's never been opened? You know, come on. Anyway.
I've got one sealed game, which is a copy of Metroid Fusion on the Game Boy Advance.
Oh, gorgeous.
And the only reason that is sealed is that I used to play a lot of my Game Boy Advance games on a flash cart.
Yep.
So I had my games loaded up and I had my game save file, and I was in Toys R Us one time and they had Metroid Fusion on clearance. I think it was about £12 or something. So I bought it at the time. I never really got round to opening it because I was halfway through a save game on my flash cart. And then since then, I'd picked up other copies of it in like secondhand shops or car boot sales. So I've got a couple of copies of Metroid Fusion anyway.
Yeah.
So I never really felt the need to open it.
Yes.
And it's perhaps it's definitely my favorite Game Boy Advance game. It's one of my favorite games ever. So having that as a little piece and knowing that I just bought it from a shop at the time, it's not like I've bought it as a sealed item. It's just quite a fun little curiosity to have.
No,
and if I ever end up really strapped for cash, I know I can sell that one and, get a few quid for it.
Yeah,
so
I can totally get into that.
That's the only sealed game I've got, apart from a couple of Wii U ones I've just not got round to playing yet.
Oh, man, I recently picked up a Wii U, like in the box. Irrelevant. It's just nice to have the box. And I did a jailbreak on it, and I'm just playing all these games, and I'm just like, I just can't believe how amazing the Wii U is. I don't own a Switch. I'm not there yet. The announcement of Dread, that dates this particular episode. Yeah. I'm probably going to buy a Switch because of that. I'm like about 80%. I've got like 3 Metroids left in Samus Returns on the 3DS. Like,
such a good game.
Like last night, this last week, I have half an hour for lunch. I run to my car and I've been trying to get through that sort of first Amiga Metroid and then the Diggernaut. And I battled all bloody week. And I kind of watched after about maybe 4 or 5 hours of trying. I'm like, I'll just watch a dude do it. I've still got to physically do it. And I watch him. I was like, right, I see what has to be done.
That's the toughest part of the game, isn't it? That digging orc.
Yeah. And well, I've just got past him, and now I'm like, and so last night I went to bed about 9:30, and then I'm laying in bed, and my wife came to bed, and I was like, you get woke, and you're like, oh, now I'm kind of awake. So I came into my room.
Just have a quick go.
And it's like, that was 10:30, 1:26. I looked at the clock, and I was like, headphones on, like as quiet as I could be. I beat that bloody digging orc. Oh my God. It's probably the best gaming experience. Zero Mission was the best game I'd ever played in my life.
Yeah.
This has been so great. And I may buy a Switch. So, but I got to play Fusion. Fusion's next after I've got through this. Take a little break.
Have you played Fusion before?
No, it's next.
Oh, yeah. It's Fusion that I will just always have a game save on the go. And if I pick up my Game Boy Advance, it'll usually have that in it. It's just such a good game. And yeah, Dread is like a direct sequel to it. It picks up directly after it. So it'll be a good one to play.
I'm super excited.
Yeah.
All right. So Game Boys then. So when did let's just get a little bit back on track, because I don't care where we go.
No, this slots in quite nicely.
Yeah, I don't care where we go, but when did you sort of start getting into picking up Game Boys and refurbishing them and kind of becoming, because JoeBleeps I think probably leans as much towards the chip tuning and the making music with the Game Boys, but obviously you had to start somewhere with a Game Boy.
It all kind of happened around the same sort of time. So to go back, I mean, in terms of Game Boys, as I say, I grew up with like the Amstrad and the Amiga, and then other people started getting, there was the odd person with the NES or the Master System, and then I had a lot of these little, like the little LCD handheld games.
Yeah, little Game and Watch.
That used to be about, and I still remember somebody at school telling me about this Nintendo Game Boy, and it's like one of those, but you can swap the games. So I was like, oh, that sounds good. And then when I actually saw it and held it, I was like, oh, it's like it just felt so space age to have like, it wasn't just like the Game and Watch where you've got like the predetermined things that could be on or off screen at any given time. It was like, it was proper pixels, it was proper games within this thing. And I grew up with two younger brothers and a younger sister, and in our household it was like, if you had a computer,
you were the big brother with the game.
I was. So it was like, it was one of those where everyone had to have their fair share and their turn, and everyone was in everyone else's face all the time. And having this thing where I could just be on my own, in my own space. I didn't have a TV in my room or anything like that. All that was elsewhere. So having that as an escape, I think that was the point where I went from having played computer games to really being into them. And the fact that I could sit on my own and not be always, I was always wary of people watching me play games because I thought I'd suck. But when I started playing on my own, I realized I was actually quite good. Like my scores on Tetris were pretty high compared to a lot of people I knew. I was actually starting to complete games like Super Mario Land, and my confidence went up with the gaming, and I actually started really enjoying them. And it was from there that everything sprung up. So fast forward however many years it is, when I discovered that you can use Game Boys for making music. So was this like late teens or? So what for the, no, that was relatively recent. I think it was around 2012 I started getting into relatively that. Recent. So it's a huge fast forward. So, you know, in the time since getting into my Game Boy and loving that, I was always on like, you know, the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Advance SP, onto the DSs. I was always obsessed with the Nintendo handhelds, always have been. I think nobody does it quite like Nintendo in terms of the handhelds. And then there was the Mega Drives and Super Nintendo, loved all of those. I was properly into consoles from there. PlayStation 2. Since the Game Boy and falling in love with video games and really clicking with video games, I've pretty much had every console at any given point. And in terms of modifications, I got into modifying those because we in the PAL territories were fine with what we had until the internet came along and told us how good everybody had it on the NTSC. And they had the full speed games with the full screen, and you suddenly boot up your Super Nintendo and you look at the screen and you think, oh yeah, we got these bars at the top and bottom, and you see these videos of how it should play. And then with at least you got SCART, you know. Yeah, we were lucky with SCART. We had our RGB, so but it felt wasted on it. You know, if you had like the full screen, full speed, and the SCART. So I started to get obsessed with all of that. And that was the first sort of modding I really got into, which was, you know, because the internet was there were tutorials there. So I could find out what parts I needed. I could follow those. I could open up these consoles And, you know, the first mods I was doing was things like the 50 hertz, 60 hertz switch to get the full screen display on Mega Drive and Super Nintendo.
Right.
Region lockouts, and so you could play
Yeah.
like Japanese and USA cartridges and things
Yeah.
like that. So they were the first times I was really opening up consoles and getting stuck in with a soldering iron and learning how to do all of that. So I had experience of some mods and attempting mod chips and that kind of thing when I started to find out about chiptune. Now, my first part of discovering that, because it's such a huge genre, and knowing what to look for. Like at first I was going on, you know, record shops and trying to find examples of chiptune music, and it just wasn't there. It's kind of separate from it. It's just not a commercial music scene. So trying to find out what was good and who was good and what's worth listening to was really difficult at first. And I found a few things on playlists, listened to a lot of stuff on SoundCloud. But at that point, it felt kind of like listening to ringtones, like a novelty, really. It was like, oh, that's quite cool that you can do like a chiptune cover of that song and that sort of thing. And it was the fact that I found out that these things were made on modified Game Boys. And I still had quite a few Game Boys knocking about because I love trolling around car boot sales. So I had a decent collection of random bits and pieces I'd found. So I had a few older Game Boys, some that I could take apart and start to modify. And again, there's tutorials online. So I started looking at things like these Pro Sound mods, which sounds a lot fancier than it is. A Pro Sound mod's just basically bypassing your headphone amp, so you get a cleaner audio signal.
Right.
That was the big one with chiptune, because you do.
And that would take out some of the hum and stuff that you get because of the running off the same power lines and things like that. So
it's quieter, but it's cleaner. So if you run it through a mixer or an amp, then it comes through much better.
Yeah.
And then also, like you said before about the screens, the fact that you couldn't see those in a dimly lit room, so it was trying to find out about backlighting those screens. So one of the first mods I did was I took like a front light out of a broken Game Boy Advance SP and transplanted it into a Game Boy Color, like over the top of the screen.
Right.
So that kind of lit it up. So that was before all of these IPS and AGS screens and everything else came along.
I can imagine when I was talking to Joseph about, you have to remind me the program that he used, but you're basically programming like on the Game Boy. And what was that? What would be the one that he
LSDJ?
Yeah, that's right. And if you couldn't see what the hell was going on, I mean, that's a laborious process as it is.
Yeah, and I think particularly if you're playing live shows, they're all in like dimly lit rooms, and I've seen people with like the old worm lights and things over the top of the screen. It's like you're making life very difficult for yourself with that. So yeah, the backlit screens are crucial for that. So anyway, so I got into doing that just simply because I could. I mean, I've always had a tendency to, if there's something I can take apart and interfere with, I'll take it apart and interfere with it. It's just I enjoy that process. So when I found out you could modify these Game Boys, I was like, all right, I've got to try that. So then I had these modified Game Boys, and I'm like, well, I may as well try out this music software. So I got a flash cart and I got LSDJ and put it on there and followed a few tutorials and got a few tunes working, and it was quite good fun. But then the tipping point was when I went to a sort of chiptune festival.
That seems bonkers.
Superbite. Yeah.
A festival.
So this was in the UK. It was a one-day event. It was in Antwerp Mansion in Manchester. So it's like this really run-down, old, huge mansion. It was like, honestly, as a day, it was so surreal. It was like something you'd see in a film or something and not expect it to actually be real. So,
or like a real cheap horror film or something.
Yeah, it was like this huge rundown mansion, like, and there was a full massive PA and everything set up in there. And I'd gone, because it was like it's billed as a whole video game thing. So they had like retro gaming consoles set up, and there were stalls and people selling stuff, and there was the music. So it was like a whole 8-bit festival sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I can still remember really vividly. It was like, oh, the first act on. Now I'm there, new to all of this scene. Loads of the people who were there have been into it for a while and are like super excited and like, oh, and the first act on. So everyone piles into the room, and then it started. And the difference between kind of listening to this stuff on my laptop or my phone and thinking, oh, that's kind of cool little tune, to hearing like the proper music being performed live to a crowd through a massive PA, it was like an epiphany.
Wow.
And having grown up with all the games and everything else, those sounds just tap right into the nostalgia.
Yeah.
But you got the new, really beefy, bassy sounds kicking in and vibrating right through you. And it was just like, right, this is what I want to do. And I've always had
and JoeBleeps was born.
That was it. That was the epiphany. I mean, I've always had it's like a sort of ADHD kind of autistic spectrum tendency to just obsess over things and then just quickly flip over to something else and forget all about it. And that was just took hold at that point. That was going to become my obsession from there. And I went home and obsessed over learning how to use the software to make the music that sounded as good. You know, some of the artists that were on there, like watching a full live Chipsel set was just amazing. So I was like super excited about the hardware, about the people, about the different acts, about the software and making the music and everything else. And then over the coming years, as I got into it, I think because I was so obsessed, I got quite prolific in terms of making the Game Boys. So I modded loads of Game Boys. I had stacks of them. And then I started to post those on Instagram. And that started to get a bit of traction. And then I got to know people in the chiptune community and started modding stuff for them. And then they would post about their stuff. And then other people would get in touch with me. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And it was hand in hand in terms of making the music and doing the mods. And I definitely got, because I had the experience with it, I had no knowledge at all of making electronic music from that starting point. So I had a lot to learn. But I did have a bit of a history with the modding. So I had a bit of an inroad with that. I started to go to every single live chiptune show that there was. And luckily around that era, sort of 2012 onwards, there were quite a few chiptune shows in the northwest of England, around the Manchester and Liverpool area. So I was going to a lot. I was seeing loads of acts. I was getting to know a lot of people. I was sort of trading a lot of my hardware. So by the time that festival came around the next year and the year after, I ended up like I performed my first set on the open mic night. I had a stall set up and was selling some of my Game Boys one year, and then ended up like I did a workshop on how to use the software on another year. So it was like I got more and more involved with that scene. Doing that workshop ended up leading on to taking part in a radio documentary for BBC Radio 4 about chiptune music. I had a full day working at the BBC contributing to that. So it was a really cool thing because I never tried to be someone within it. I wasn't like trying to be that well-known person within it, but it just kind of came together really.
You were just really passionate and it just made doors open for you.
And I was lucky because I knew so many people and because I'd made all the hardware and people knew who I was very lucky in terms of getting booked for live shows because people knew me. And although I thought my music probably sucked, it was like people would say, yeah, you can come and play my show. So I'd open up on certain shows and I'd get my chance to play some live shows as well, which I think is a really difficult thing for people to do if you're making your own music, to actually make the inroads to get booked. So creating the hardware, I think, helped get my foot in the door with that side of it as well.
I just want to sort of like get a bit more of an understanding of the process. Like obviously there's a difference between, because I'm looking through your Instagram, I'm seeing images of like a bench covered in mixing gear and you with the keyboard guitar and there's a Game Boy sitting there.
Oh my god! But my Instagram is not going to help you understand.
Well, I tried to get this from Joseph as well, because like there's this concept of like when like a DJ used to be like a couple of decks, a couple of records, mixing them together, listening ahead, bringing this in, knowing that's going to fit and knowing the result's going to be in their head. And then I'm like, so with a Game Boy, are you doing something similar? Are you pre-tracking it? These days, a DJ realistically is probably taking a laptop with a bunch of pre-mixed stuff and could, for what it matters, it could be one massive MP3 file that goes for 6.5 hours and Ibiza bounces. And that's it.
Yeah.
So can you explain to me and us what you're actually doing with the Game Boy? Because Joseph explained it where it's like, I basically kind of run a track and I go bleep, 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 bleep. And then I go bleep, bloop, bleep, bloop. And he just starts adding and he's got 4 channels. But obviously there's a lot more to that. And how does that translate when you're doing it
there's
live?
Different ways of doing it as well. Okay. So, well, first of all, just going back, I really pity anyone who uses my Instagram as trying to find an inroad as to what I do, because I think a lot of people will set up different Instagrams for different aspects of what they're into. So they'll maybe have like their gaming Instagram and their modding Instagram, whereas I just post whatever I feel like doing on any given day. And as I say, I have these absolute obsessions. So I might be like months and months and months of posting
Yeah.
like modifying Super Nintendos, and then that'll just stop, and then there'll be something else.
Yeah,
for a
yeah,
bit.
yeah.
So,
Mine's the same. If you look
and,
at the last 7 years, it's like the 5 hobbies I've done for like 2 years at a time.
So it does fluctuate, and at the moment, one of my obsessions is sort of expanding my music output and playing with synthesizers and modifying those and that kind of thing. But that first taste of making electronic music, aside from the old Music and Music 2000 on the PlayStation, which was one of my favorite games on that console, was through learning how to use LSDJ on the Game Boy. So that process involves, it's trying to explain it without making it sound confusing, because it is quite a steep learning curve on it. But once you get over that hump, once you actually get a melody from it, you can just keep going and keep going. But in terms of what the software actually does, so the Game Boy hardware has its sound chip or sound chips, and they have 4 channels of sound. So at any one time, you can have 4 separate sounds all running at once.
Yeah.
You have 2 pulse wave channels, which is like your bleepy, bloopy kind of sounds, what you normally associate with your video games.
Yeah.
Your third channel is your WAV channel, which is like your wave channel, which can be like your bass sounds and your samples and things like that are handled by that channel.
Yep.
So, like when you're playing Ninja Turtles and you pause it and it goes pizza time, then that's on that wave channel.
Right.
And then you've also got the noise channel, which is just like sort of unfiltered noise, just like a static hiss, like that kind of sound.
Or an ocean or a breeze.
So you've got those 4 sounds. And what the software allows you to do is manipulate those sounds into instruments by creating like the wave shapes. So you might start with your noise channel, for instance, would have like that. And if you create a sound that very quickly peaks and then stops, then you get like a snare drum kind of sound, for instance.
Right.
So that might go like kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then if you sequence that using the software, and you get another bit of filtered sound that goes like, so you get like, and then that's on one of your channels. Right. And then your other 3 channels, you've created other instruments that you sequence into other little loops, and then you have those all running at the same time. And that's how you kind of generate your songs. So that's like the creative part of the process, whittled down to something.
Yeah. And so you sort of treat them, each track's almost like an instrument, and then can you move it all up and then octaves? Because I can remember like a friend of my dad, well, my mum and dad had like a really cool synth, and we would just play. Like I grew up kind of listening to like Tubular Bells, and anybody who knows what I'm talking about knows what I'm talking about. And so we would basically just, you have a microphone, we just like a wah, and then you just run up and down the keyboard, and you're floating around in space making different octaves of that noise. So can you do that?
Yeah, you can do all that, and you can add like effects to it. So you can run different tables and sort of for each instrument you can you can emphasize those, or you can make them decay slightly, or you can give a bit of modulation to them. You can change, you could have like a whole section run and then have a key change to them, sort of copy paste that whole section. But the bizarre thing to me was, at first, when I first saw it being used, I was thinking people were programming it all on their computer, flashing it to the Game Boy and playing it. But it's actually the interface. It's the D-pad, the A and B button, start and select. And that's it. That is what's used for operating the entire software. So you use like your select buttons like shift key. So you've got a lot of hotkey combinations going on and double taps and 2 buttons at the same time. But it becomes second nature. After a while, you don't have to think about which is which, to the extent that it's very hard to teach someone, because when you're trying to explain to someone what to do and you show them, it's like, how do you copy and paste? I don't know. My thumbs just sort of do it.
Yeah. And so is there a kind of, is there a purist kind of like different disciplines within that sort of culture?
There's always going to be people being a bit purist and preachy about what is chiptune and what's not. And, I know people who make music on Amigas, on Atari ST, or use the Game Boy in conjunction with other things, or does the whole lot on Ableton on their laptop. And it doesn't matter. I mean, if I enjoy listening to it, I enjoy listening to it. But there are a lot of purists about it and saying, it's not proper chiptune if it's not this, and this. But I never really enter into any of that. I mean, it's that kind of thing, which is why I don't use Facebook anymore.
Where's the actual
argument platform?
Yeah, absolutely. Where's the actual library of sounds Is that what's in the Game Boy?
Now this is the thing. You can get like patches. People will share like different. It's basically lists of settings, but you program them in. So it's not like you download an instrument pack and use it. You actually create all of your own instruments from scratch.
Right.
Now, what you could do is create a song, and I did this early on in particular. You create a song, and then you would sort of copy that save file, delete all the music from it, but keep all your instruments so you could kind of use those again. But generally, each time you make a song, you'll end up tweaking those instrument sounds to fit your song anyway. So you get quite used to just generating a good bass sound or a kick drum or a snare or a hi-hat or whatever. And, you know, you can do so much with it. And I think that's one of the things that appeals to me, is that a lot of this kind of music making software I always found quite overwhelming. There's so many different parameters and instruments and things that you can use, but when you've just simply got those 4 channels of sound, and that is it, and you've got like 4 or 5 buttons to control it, you're so limited that really encourages like creativity and problem solving and trying to expand as much as you can from a small but perfect core. And that appealed to me. I found it a lot less overwhelming to start with something small and then get creative with it and expand from there. So that was one of the things that appealed to me.
And all the freedom of like I for a while there I played around with something Cakewalk, you know. And so you're scouring the net for a bunch of samples and you're kind of dropping them in, and 6 minutes later you've got this horrible noise of 12 samples that you're like, oh my God, how did I get here? The first 30 seconds was beautiful, and then it kind of just went to crap. Whereas because you've got these finite limitations of a 4-piece band and it's all being generated within the Game Boy, there's no external kind of rubbish that sneaks in. It's kept kind of crisp on its own.
As a teenager, I was always like really into kind of punk music and pop punk and things like that. You know, you sort of strip down 3-piece raw music. And I went to loads of punk gigs as a teenager, and going to chiptune gigs, there's a very similar sort of vibe to it in terms of that DIY approach to it, of you know, booking your own shows, playing your own shows, and all that kind of thing. So there was a lot of that appealed to me as well. And it's like, it's like you've got the hardware synthesizer equivalent of a 3-piece band, you know. So it's good fun with that. But to get back to your question about following on from what Joseph was talking about, there are different ways of doing it live. So there's 2 modes on LSDJ. So what I tend to do is the lazy option, which is, because I'm such a perfectionist, it's about making sure everything's just right. So I will have my Game Boy cartridge with all of my songs that I've created saved on it. So it's very much like a DJ. I'll have 2 Game Boys. I'll have the 2 cartridges with the songs on, and I'll have a mixer. And while one song is playing, I'll start queuing up the next one and then get it ready for a smooth transition over into the next one. And then while that's playing, I'll queue up the next one. So that's very much like your DJ approach, and that can be done. So, you know, I think particularly for playing live shows, you're playing with work from 1989. There's a lot that can go wrong. And I've been to loads of shows where songs will just cut out halfway through, things will crash, things will stop working, you know, you'll lose save files, whatever else. So, you know, these things can happen. So I
forget to change your batteries in your DMG. And
exactly.
Batteries, I mean, it seems silly, but it's possible, right?
And it's fiddly stuff as well. So like, I will never have a drink if I'm playing a live show until I've finished my set. Because even though it might calm your nerves, you're going to be a shambles because it's like precision work that you're doing. So that's the way I do the live music. But I know a lot of other people will use live mode. And with live mode, you will have like a lot of different sequences pre-programmed in there. And you are triggering those live, and you might get one starting and then another and then another. So you can basically infinitely keep your songs and loops and things going by just triggering those. Now I'll start this bass line and then I'll move into this bit, and you can link and keep things running on the fly. So that's like a halfway between you're not generating the music from scratch live. You've got these pre-programmed sequences, but you're putting them together in various different ways on the fly while you're performing.
And that's pretty brave. I mean, there's a lot of, like you said, there could be a lot to go amiss, you know, relying on that process. Have you? I mean,
it's good though, because it gives you something like to do. One of the awkward things with it is, and I've seen it a lot of the time, is really essentially you're just pressing play, and a lot of us who are creating this music on our own are not really extroverts. You know, it's a hugely introverted scene. So to get up on stage and start playing this music, it goes against the grain for a lot of us. And you have a crowd of quite introverted people as well, and it's hard to get them on board.
So an awkward room.
It's a part of the art. Yeah, it's a part of the art. I mean, it's calling it an awkward room makes it sound like it's a hostile crowd, and it's not. There is nothing warmer and more loving than a chiptune crowd, because it's the fact that everyone in there is like, I'm getting to watch chiptune live. This is great. But if you want the crowd to be on board, then you have to lead from the front, and you have to get into it, and you have to move, and you have to dance, and you have to not worry about looking daft, and just really get into it, because you aren't playing your guitar, you aren't drumming, you just have this Game Boy in front of you, and that's like a prop. And if you make that your prop and you have it, and you're keeping an eye on what you're doing, but a lot of the time you're just kind of watching it cycle through and getting ready for the next bit. But you have to make it look like you're doing something. You can't just press play and stand there and go, that's my song. The next one will be on in a couple of minutes, and then I'll press play again. You can't do that. It's a whole performance, and learning how to do that. Like I say, I actually lost count of the amount of gigs that I'd ended up doing through those few years while I was really into it. And it does seem to have quietened down. I mean, certainly with COVID, things have really died down in terms of the live music scene. But I was not playing quite as many gigs because I wasn't making quite as much music. I was getting into all sorts of other things. But I've done like live streams during this time. So I did a whole set of Green Day covers for one show. Yeah, and I did like a tour of all my gaming hardware and modding stuff quite recently for let's just rewind a bit.
So you did Green Day covers. So what? You listen to a Green Day song, or you kind of get the music or whatever, and then you basically do a cover in 8-bit chiptune using a Game Boy.
That's it.
So do you have do you have Spotify albums and stuff that people can go and listen to?
Yeah, I've got stuff on, I'm not so much on Spotify. I've got one track on Spotify, but I'm mainly on SoundCloud and Bandcamp, where I post my stuff, because you can just post your own user-generated content on there, and there's no licensing or anything else like that to faff about with. But in terms of... What
would be the easiest way for someone to kind of get access to like that sort of stuff? Is it best to sort of go to your YouTube and then redirect like that, or
I've put links on all my YouTube videos. If you scroll down, there's links to my music pages and things like that. So that would probably be an easy way of going about it.
And people just look up JoeBleeps on YouTube and just follow the path from there.
If you Google JoeBleeps, it brings up all the stuff that you kind of want, probably. I was quite pleased actually. A while ago it got to a point where I don't really do vanity searches, but you're just curious to see what sort of hits you're going to get in terms of the content that you're putting out. So if I search for JoeBleeps, like that whole first page is pretty much all my content. I'm quite happy with that.
You don't have the same name as some sort of like corporate criminal.
No, I was lucky with that. And it was the whole thing with the JoeBleeps name was just like a spur of the moment thing, because I started making my own music on a Game Boy, and then the first time I was going to upload it onto SoundCloud, it was like, okay, so what's the artist name? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, so I'm a teacher, and my username was always Joe Teach, because that's what my mates called me, because they always found it really funny that I became a teacher, because it's just like I'm the shyest person you'd ever meet. But they always called me Joe Teach. So Joe Teach was my name on sort of online stuff for quite a while. And then I was going to put that, and then I thought, because it's like the bleepy music, JoeBleeps kind of has a similar ring to it. And then when I said it, it kind of... It's like that sort of generic, everyday Joe Blogs kind of feel to it as well. Groovy. So I just I thought, that sounds all right. And I put it on, and then I was kind of stuck with it from there, really. But it's been good, because in this age of Google, it's hard to think of a name for stuff that hasn't already been done. And just by sheer luck, there's not really anything else out there that's been called JoeBleeps. So I've ended up with that as my kind of brand and persona, if you like, and it's for better or worse, it's worked out pretty well, I think.
When I was talking to Joseph Tompkins, I don't think it's all embarrassing. I think it was a funny thing. He said, because he did a live show, and you were there, and you come up to him, or you were talking, and you're talking about his name, stage name or something, and he said Joseph Tompkins, and you said something along the lines of, "It sounds really punk," and he's like, cool. I'll just stick with it then.
I thought it was great. Yeah, because everyone has like, and everyone has names that are very difficult to remember. Like it'll be like ZX321ZZZ or something like that, and it might look all great on their logo, but it's like, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah. And I just love the fact that instead of trying to come up with something cool, it was just like his name was just right out there, and it was like it's the honesty to it and everything. Else.
He's a good egg. I've got
lovely guy, but on the way to the show we were chatting about it and saying it looks really cool. You've got all these like Hyperblast or anyone else's name on the bill, and then it's like Joseph Tompkins. It's like there's just no pretense about it. The music speaks for itself, and his music's awesome. So we really like that. So I'm glad he wasn't offended. I felt like afterwards I might have felt like I was speaking out of turn with it. So if my point got across, and that's good.
He was happy as. I've got a couple of Joseph's Beskar shells, a DMG and a pocket, and the laser etching
some cool stuff with that.
Yeah, really groovy. Its postage is really rough in Australia because it just is. But I was more than happy to kind of do what I had to do to get those. Good egg. Yeah. Look, it's just anything that's creative. I'm so envious of people because I'm creative, but I'm more creative for function. It's my nature. Sort of like, hey, I need to put something here. If only the shelf was 4 inches taller. I know. I'll just glue 4 inches of wood underneath each leg. That's my creative. I'm more about function than form.
Well, that's the right approach, isn't it? It's like, but at least you're being sensible with it. Like, I'm like, that thing's perfectly fine as it is. How can I interfere with it and make it different?
Yeah, maybe I hang it from the ceiling. Then it'll be taller. Yeah. Look, I think it's really amazing. And another thing that kind of blows me away is the freestyle skating. Now, that's probably a large part of your Instagram.
It is at the moment, yeah.
And it's one of those things, isn't it? And it just blows me away what you're doing in your backyard there. And your ankles, dude, like I just don't know how I would survive. Like I grew up skating. I grew up in Hobart, Tasmania, and we skated. And I was never a tricky skater. A couple of little rail grinds and a few little sort of things here and there. But it was more for transport than anything. But holy cow, what you do in your backyard with these skaties is pretty bloody rad.
Thank you.
Yeah. What are you doing? Like,
what am I doing? Yeah, killing myself with it.
I know.
No,
to explain it, like as a layman, you're doing things like where the skateboard's sitting on its edge, and then you're standing up on like the rail of the deck and the truck. So you kind of got a heel on a wheel and a heel on a wheel, and then you'll do these things which is like so subtle. What the board will do, I'm going to try and be cool and say like Cooper flips. And then you land with it over here, and then you land with it over there. And there's a lot of videos that are winners. Like there's a succession of tricks that are all linked together, but it can't always be that way. But holy cow, you crush it.
It's like a cross between skateboards and hacky sack, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Right. Okay. So with that, I mean, I said earlier about the video games, and I wasn't always that into video games when I was younger, and a lot of that is because from about age 12 I was obsessed with skateboarding and loved skateboarding, and skateboarding has always been the thing that I loved the most, and I've done it on and off over the years, continue to do it. Never really felt like I'm at a point where I don't do it anymore. There's, even if I go through months without skating, there's always one sat in the boot of my car just in case I find a nice park or car park.
Yeah, right.
Like that. But as I was getting older, it was getting harder. It was getting harder to get back up when I fall. When I injured myself, like sprained ankles, twisted knees, things like that were taking a lot longer to heal. And I was not skating as much at all. And I ended up with real problems with my knees. I was diagnosed with osteoarthritis.
Oh, geez.
And also had a sort of inflamed tendon that connects the shin to the knee on my left leg. And I was really feeling like, first of all, like for the 5 or so years before that, I felt like I pretty much learned everything I would ever learn on a skateboard. I'd run out of tricks that I could do, and I enjoyed doing those. And I'd go to a skate park and I'd have a skate, and my knees would kill me for the next few days.
Yeah.
And then, you know, another few weeks later, I might go out. And that was hard because I was used to, when I was younger, skating all the time and having the muscle memory and being able to do tricks.
Yeah.
And because I wasn't skating as often, the muscles weren't there. And because the muscles weren't there, the weaknesses were there. And it felt like it was on the way out, really. It felt like I wasn't going to be doing it much more.
Now, that's sad when it's something that you love.
Yeah. And I love skateboarding that much that I really wanted to be able to continue doing it for as long as I could. So I was like going to the gym with a personal trainer, trying to do rehab on my knees, trying to work out ways of building up the strength. Yep. And I watched the Game Changers documentary on Netflix about, you know, rehabilitation and recovery and strength training on a vegan diet. So I thought, well, there's nothing to lose. I'd been vegetarian a few years before for about 5 years. I thought, well, how hard is it being vegan? I don't know. I'll try it.
Yep.
And that was about 1.5 years ago, and I'm still doing it now, and it made a dramatic change. And I think it's not just the vegan diet. I think you've got to take all that sort of thing with a pinch of salt. I think it helped, and it certainly made me feel fitter, and my knees now feel as good as they did like 20 years ago.
That's great.
But I think that's largely in part to having it hand in hand with freestyle skateboarding. You know, when the pandemic hit, I'd been trying to learn freestyle skateboarding for about 3 months. And then I was stuck at home for months, and we were in the middle of a heat wave, and I got in a habit of, I would be working from home. So I'd do my work, and then 3-4 o'clock, I'd go outside and I would just skate on my patio for like a couple of hours. And learn all these tricks. And because it was freestyle was something I'd always fancied doing, but never really understood.
Yeah.
And there was a supplier in the UK who was getting them in. So I thought I'd you know, jump in and try it. Wasn't sure how it'd go, and I really enjoyed doing it. And I think with the lockdown, it's just that small space, flat land, it was just perfectly suited. And I think in conjunction with the vegan diet to try and help with the recovery of my knees, to those relatively small movements. I mean, you know, I'd been years and years of push, and then jump down huge sets of steps and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, to clarify, you're not pushing the deck at all. You're literally standing
very
on
little
it.
Pushing. Yeah, it's just like tic-tacking and rolling around. You know, you can do it in car parks, you can do it in the backyard. But I think the conjunction of the change in diet and the relatively small movements, but repetitive movements of the legs have just built the strength up around my knees.
Yeah.
And now I am getting pretty good at it.
I
can do stuff.
Agreed.
I could do stuff that I wouldn't have dreamed I could do like a year and a half ago. So I you know, I always loved skateboarding, and I was always blindingly average at it. I was always quite hesitant. I was always quite scared of getting hurt. So I would take my time learning things. And I was always like, okay, I was never really rubbish, but I was never brilliant. I was always fine. But with the freestyle, it just sort of tapped into my sensibilities, the sort of tricks I'd always enjoyed doing anyway. And, you know, I skated with one of my mates who I've skated with for a long time, a little while ago, and he was watching me do the freestyle, and it was like, it's like that's just been waiting for you to do it all your life. And it was like, it did kind of feel like that. It's like, that's just, it's worked for me. And I think in terms, you know, age 44, being able to do stuff like that. And the fact that I went through a few years, you know, I was getting back into skating sort of late 30s, and I had a pretty bad ankle sprain, which took me about 8 months to recover from. And from there, it just became a bit of a painful slog with skateboarding. Like I say, that was where I felt like I wasn't going to skate again. So having been through that, like every single time I'll go out on my board, it doesn't matter if I learn a new trick. The fact that I can go out and play around on my skateboard is a joy. And it's something that I totally don't take for granted anymore. And I, you know, I love doing it. And there's a cool little community in the same way that, like, you know, like with your retro modding community and that sort of thing, there's a great little community with freestyle because it's a very niche part of skateboarding. And so I've made loads of good friends with that. And I like posting the clips and sharing and enthusing with those. So yeah, it's been a really good thing. Skateboarding, I've always loved, but it's like I've fallen in love with it all over again with the freestyle. So yeah, there's a lot of people who started following me for Game Boys and Neon Advance and all the rest of it, and then it's like just this old guy hopping around on a skateboard every day. It's like, when's he going to post something good?
I think back now to you and I are very similar vintage, you know, skaters like Rodney Mullen, you know, and they're the guys that kind of, there was dudes going big on stair sets, you know, backside 180s and, you know, heel flips and stuff, but Mullen was doing these things like dark slides and things where it's like, what the heck? And it's funny, I saw him and Tony Hawk on something the other day, and I'm like, the dude's old. Like the way Tony Hawk still skates is just
it's amazing, isn't it?
bonkers. He's just like this eagle that just knew how to fly and will just always fly. Like,
I think this is great though, because as a kid, I always dreamed like, if I thought I would still be able to skate into my 40s, like people didn't do that, when I was younger. Whereas now there is a generation beyond me who are still skating and still ripping. So it's great because I feel like, I've still got quite a bit of time
you're a young
to
fella when it comes to
that's it's all right. So that's the thing as a generational thing. That keeps going. I'm loving that.
Before you mentioned Neon Advance, so we might just sort of quickly touch on that. I did see that on your webpage. Explain to us. So it looks like the macro.
It's half a DS.
Yeah.
I got a lot of criticism at the time when that started to blow up, and people were like, "It's just half a DS." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. That's fine."
Yeah.
That's
so I guess these days they're kind of referred to as a macro.
Well, it was a macro at the time,
right?
So to put it in context, Game Boy Macro is a sort of unofficial name given to this particular version of Game Boy Advance, because the Nintendo DS
you take the top screen off and you just go single screen that because it's already got the GBA slot.
So you've got the GBA slot there. You take the top screen off. You add a resistor to trick it into thinking that the top screen is still there. And then you can just play Game Boy Advance on it. And the main advantage of that at the time was that the Game Boy Advance wasn't backlit and the DS had the lit up screen. So, you modify that and create it and you've got a Game Boy Advance. But in terms of making it, because you're removing that top half, you're left with this unsightly hinge plastic bits in. So if you wanted to do a Game Boy Macro, it was a case of you do a lot of cutting and removing bits and adding filler and painting and sanding it. And it's an endless process of painting and sanding and cutting and filling. And it still ended up looking a little bit DIY. It didn't look slick or professional enough. And I was like on a mission with the original DS, it was okay. But with the DS Lite, it's really hard to get a nice professional finish to fit with that shape. So I was on a mission to try and find a way of doing it that just wasn't as time consuming. I was being lazy, basically. And so I was looking into the options of maybe getting, this is before the 3D printers were as prolific, being able to get things molded like new face plates and things like that. And I'd seen a picture somewhere of someone just put like a little strip of wood or plastic from one hinge to the other. I thought, oh, that looks quite cool. And I had some bits of acrylic rod that I'd bought a while ago for something else. And I thought I'd just cut one of them to size and try and put it in and got it working. It looked quite cool. So I put a picture up on my Instagram and like the first 10 comments were, oh, does it light up? And it's like, no, sorry. But from there, that kind of sowed the seeds for what eventually became Neon Advance, which is a Game Boy Macro, which retains as much of the original features and aesthetic as possible of the DS Lite. So it keeps the hinges, it keeps all the other parts, it keeps a lot of the functionality, but it instead of where the hinge was placed, it's got this light up strip. So there's an LED in there, it lights up the plastic strip and it just looks kind of cool. And getting that working in the first place was quite easy. And then trying to fine tune the process so there was just the right amount of light so that it lights up, it's evenly distributed, but it doesn't give you a headache when you're trying to look at the screen. That was a massive part of the development. And where I'd seen other people doing and making it since, it was like, you can look at it straight away and think, no, that's going to give you a headache. But I did it like as a whole project. So I got totally into it. I was enjoying making them. I was aware of the fact that it was just like a recycled console. But I did it like a whole art project. So I got into it and came up with a name for it and designed a logo and designed packaging and started selling it to friends and getting feedback. And then I was about to get an article on Nintendo Life website about it. And then I did a tweet just before that went live that was just like sharing a few pictures of it on Twitter. And then that just absolutely blew up. So yeah, it was one of my things on my bucket list to have a tweet go viral, and that one definitely went viral.
What, in a positive way, or?
Oh God, yeah. It was awesome. So I ended up having like interviews and pieces on things like Forbes and Kotaku and Mashable. Did a whole piece on their Snapchat and ended up with a massive influx of people through that. And it was just like, everything really blew up. And I wasn't really prepared for it at the time, but it was a really exciting time because I'd been modding Game Boys for years, and kind of got a little bit of a reputation for that, mainly in the chiptune community. But this was just like, yeah, it was massive. It was really exciting.
So are you still doing these and like selling them and
No, because I'm stupid.
oh gosh.
Anybody else, like, because the people still regularly messaging me asking, "Oh, you're still making them? Are you still doing them? I want to buy one." And I'm just not a business person at all.
Yeah,
like I was
yeah.
making them, and I made a whole art project, and each one was always different. And I'd post it on my page, and then I'd sell it, and that'd be good because then I could buy more parts and do more. And then other things came along and distracted me, and I just kind of stopped doing them. But I keep planning to, and I've not said, you know, like with the skateboarding, it's like I never say I've quit things. I just have breaks from things. I tend to go led by my my mojo. So it's whatever I am enjoying doing at the time, I'll embrace it. And if something feels like it's a chore or I'm forcing it, there's no point wasting my life on that.
That's it. When you'll enjoy
so
it the most.
I'm still planning on doing more, but I'll have to wait till the bug bites and then I'll continue doing more. But yeah, I'm sure it's frustrating for people who think they're really cool and want me to do more. And anybody else, the fact that people are waiting to buy them, it seems daft to not make them and sell them. But I'm more driven by the process. I like making, I like tinkering about with things.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll get into doing one thing. If my heart's not in it, the end result, I'm never as proud of it. So like at the moment, what I'm mainly into is playing around with adding in other things to the music. So as well as the LSDJ, playing around with synchronizing that with our exterior stuff like drum machines and that kind of thing and effects. I'm also into my YouTube channel that started about a year ago, and that's been steadily building, and I'm quite enjoying the process of learning how to make videos, how to edit videos, as well as the things I'm actually doing within the videos. So, you know, I would spend ages making and building stuff and then posting the end result on Instagram. Whereas now I'm filming the actual process and sharing that, which is
Joe
it's
teach.
a different outlook on it. Yeah. Teaching again. So I always felt like there was not a place for me on YouTube. I felt like YouTube was really saturated with content in terms of modding, in terms of retro gaming. So I thought I'm not even going to make a dent. I may as well just continue with what I'm doing and what I'm going well with on Instagram and so on. But then I found whenever I was trying to find tutorials and stuff like that, there is some great content on YouTube, but a lot of it is either someone who's just got no charisma slowly going through and explaining things badly, or someone who's just like too hyper and in your face and okay, and then we're doing this and then we're doing that, and it's like I just couldn't cope with that either. And then I was thinking, well, if there is not a video that's in the style that I want to see, then maybe there is a bit of a gap there. Then when I started thinking about doing my own videos, I thought, well, I'm a teacher, I've got those presentation skills, I can communicate things quite effectively. I know my stuff in terms of the mods and things like that, and I'm quite happy to laugh at myself if things go wrong. So I'll give it a go. So I cobbled together bits and pieces of, I mean, it's the usual approach with me. I didn't go out and buy a whole load of fancy cameras and editing equipment and everything else. I just fudged together what I had and started making a few videos, and then gradually got the hang of it as I go. The only investment I've made is I got a MacBook, but it was a 2012 MacBook, and I put a solid state drive in it, and that's enough for me to do iMovie, so I can edit on that. Because with the Windows laptop I had, editing was just a frustrating nightmare, and I kept losing things. So so that was like 250 quid or something for that, and that's about the most investment I've had on my YouTube channel. Most of what I spend the money on is the parts that I'm actually using in my videos.
Oh, that's good.
You know,
that's
if
good.
I'm installing screens and things like that.
And
the YouTube's the latest hobby that helps drive the other hobbies as well, because I'm, you know, for each video I make, I'll be trying out something else or demoing something or modding something or whatever. So yeah, it's quite a nice one to keep the mojo going with my other hobbies.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, it just shows that, you know, you can think that maybe you don't have something to offer, but if you don't find what you want, that may be what you have to offer.
That was the little revelation there. It's like, well, if I make the videos that I want to see, there might be other people who like that. And it's been a steady growth. I mean, you know, there's so much people on YouTube now that have got like, you know, millions of followers, of subscribers and all that sort of thing, that, you know, it's all in perspective. Like, you know, some of the kids at school go, oh, you've got a YouTube channel. And you're like, yeah. Oh, how many subs have you got? And I'm like, I think it's like 2.5. And they're like, 2,500. Wow. And I'm like, I thought that was quite low. And they're like, no, that's really good. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think it's not, it's enough that I tend to get a bit of interaction. It was always the interaction that I liked on Instagram. It's the comment section of chatting and discussing and sharing ideas. And I think with YouTube, I've got enough traction now that when I put a video on, it doesn't just sit there and I get like 3 views over a few months. It goes on, and over the next few days, I have a little bit of a chat and a discourse with people leaving comments. And that's quite nice. I like that. I like that interaction with people.
Yeah.
You know, before we came on, you were saying about, like, in terms of having friends and doing things like the podcast to talk to like-minded people.
Yeah.
And I think in real life, you can have a whole load of friends and people you work with and people you see all the time. But when we're into these nerdy niche hobbies, that, you know, people will just generally kind of humor you with it, but you won't often get to talk to people about it. And I found that with things like Instagram, you can tap into a whole community of like-minded people, the likes of which you could never do before the internet. You know, loads and loads of people who are into this really geeky niche thing that you're into, and you know, get excited about it together all day. It's really good, and I think YouTube's a further outlet for that as well.
Yeah, and it's really great because, like, from my own personal experience, that through Instagram and through the podcast, like, I've met a couple of people around here, Gav Nostek and Tristan Custom Handhelds, and they all live within 10 minutes of me.
Yeah.
And like tomorrow I'm going to book a library room. We've done it once before. I'm taking a couple of consoles, they got a projector, and we're going to hang out for 4 hours. But this is happening. This is happening because of this community, which I've found through Instagram and through the podcast and stuff.
Yeah.
So real friends can be made.
You just never would have been able to make, even if they did live locally, you never would have known, would you? So
no, not at all.
It's really great for that. Yeah,
it is really great. Awesome. And look, speaking of good people in the community, I always give my guests an opportunity to kind of, whether it be plug someone that could do with a bit of spotlight or just recommend stuff. Every episode I sort of find someone. My person I'm going to sort of bring up this time is it's Game Boy 3 Chud. And I hope Chud is like that crazy 80s movies about the things that lived in the sewer, because if that's true, that's like bonus points. But Game Boy 3 Chud, it's just one of those sort of Instagram where it's just a lot of really good collecting and really good enjoying of Game Boys and just pickups, and I just see a lot I like. And I would encourage anybody who's just trawling around, go over, and these are always in the show notes. And just check out his content. And just sometimes you forget about a game, or you know a game and you forget the name of it, and you're like, what the hell was that? And you're just flicking through someone's, you're like, oh, that's what that's called.
That was it. Yeah.
And then also there's the envy of like here he's got this micro with a couple of little handles that go on either side of the micro, which means an adult can actually use the micro just
without the cramps.
Without the cramps, just little things like that. So that's for me this week. Thank you, mate, for sharing your collection and stuff. And yeah, so you have the opportunity. Sometimes people just say, look, everybody's great. There's so many millions of people, and it's up to you. So I'll give you the opportunity.
That is the thing. You always live in fear of missing people out, don't you, when you start with stuff like that. And I think I've been on Instagram since, I think it's around 2012, as far back as I can remember. I think I'd been on it before that. So I've been on there for a long, long time, and a lot of people have influenced me along the way, and there's loads of people now. But the one because I could call out so many different people, and then afterwards like, oh God, I forgot about them. But the one I did want to mention was Pure Function, because he's developed the Drone Boy, which is the latest thing I've been playing with on the Game Boy.
I saw that.
So I've been making music on Game Boys for years using LSDJ, and this is a whole new, and it's a really accessible bit of software as well. To just make noise. So it's not melodic by any stretch of the imagination. It basically, those 4 sound channels that we were talking about before, they continuously run, and you just kind of alternate the sound levels and the parameters on those. And it just has a general drone going on, but running it through effects or running it at the same time as other music and things, or just tinkering about with it and getting to understand those different channels of sound on the Game Boy is great. And it's he's kind of been showing it on his Instagram, which is Pure Function, but with a 3 instead of an E.
PUR3 function. Yep.
Yeah. And I've been kind of following its development, and then it finally released. So I did like a demo video on my YouTube recently as well with it. And I really love it just in terms of a music toy to play with and to give people an understanding of what those channels of sound are without the complexity of LSDJ. And the fact that he's released it as a free bit of software, you know, you can run it on BGB on an emulator if you want to try it out, or if you've got a Game Boy with a flash card or an EverDrive, you can just pop it on there and have a tinker about with it. And I think the fact that he's developed this and released it for nothing, I think that's well worth a shout out. And I'm trying to point as many people in the direction of it as possible, because the more people play with it, the more people get creative with it, the more people have good ideas of things we can try out, and then it sort of develops a community. And I think it's quite exciting in a community where it's been LSDJ, and there's another one called Nanoloop, which are your main music making bits of software on the Game Boy. And to have something new come along that's completely different, that you can do new things with, I think is really exciting. So I've been playing with that a lot. So definitely a shout out for that bit of software and that.
No worries. Page. I've just gone to his like little Instagram link and then into his page there in Drone Boy, and then it pushes you to a GitHub, and there it is. You just there's a droneboy.gbs, and I have flashcards aplenty. And I'll admit that, you know, when you're talking about LSDJ, I don't like steep learning curves as much as I would love to give it a crack.
I do. I'm a masochist with that sort of thing.
Yeah. But something like this sounds like if I could sit there and just sort of go all tubular bells on it, then
definitely.
I could probably have a great time. That's awesome, buddy. And look, if there's any other organizations or any things that you're doing that you're bringing up or whatever, then now's the opportunity. But if you're kind of done, then I really do appreciate your time, and we can sort of wrap it up there if you like.
Yeah, that's fine. I you know, again, it's one of those, I'll always think afterwards, oh, why did I not mention that? Why did I not mention that? But it's the usual, whatever I do, whatever. I'm quite impulsive with these things, and I don't think I've got anything else exciting coming up. This podcast was the exciting thing I had coming up.
Oh, thank you, mate. It was pretty exciting for me too. Like, yeah, I mean, it's just, like, again, I don't want to get so fanboy, but I do want to give you some respect in that. Like when I first started getting into sort of modding and looking at Game Boys and working out what they are, because I was 110% blown away by the level of support and shells and parts and this and just people doing it and what people are doing with it. And every time I jump on YouTube, I'm like, how do I do the blah, blah? And then you would come up somewhere, or if I Google Google something, it's like you would come up in there somewhere, and you know, plenty of people talk about this and JoeBleeps, and I think you know, to see you kind of just take things and just really push it and give it a good go, and then move on and enjoy, and just always enjoy. That's probably the key point.
It's definitely the process. Everything's always about the process for me. The end result usually just sits and gathers dust because I'm on to the next thing. But it's that process of going through and doing. And you face problems, but then you solve the problems and you become more confident and your knowledge expands. And then, you know, you were saying like with the Game Boys that there's a massive amount of all this stuff on the market now that you could get. When I first started getting into modern Game Boys, there was very little. There was the odd, you know, coloured shell that you could get. There were the little backlight panels that you dismantle the LED and slot those in there.
Yeah.
And over the years, more and more and more and more stuff has come about. So I'm lucky in a way that I've been able to avoid all that becoming so overwhelming, because I've just been trying it out as each new thing comes along. And I've got a good background knowledge of where it came from and how the hardware works to a large extent that, you know, when something new comes along now, I'm quite confident of going in and cutting up because I've been there and I've done it all before.
Yeah, I mean, there's a new screen every 3 weeks.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Some of the people I've spoken to, and I looked through the Instagram, and they were doing like, you know, the backlight DMGs with biverts and stuff. And I've done one myself. It's a little bit stressful, because if you wreck it, you've wrecked it. You know, if you're actually doing that, it's before we were talking about the mods and regions and PALs and 50 and 60. I don't know if you're aware that the X station for the PS1, I sold that in, and you've got to lift a bunch of pins off this chip. It's 80 pins around a chip that's about the size of your thumbnail, and I don't have the eyes that I used to. It was really challenging, like really, really, really challenging. And it was only a sort of a $65 secondhand PlayStation, but I still felt
but
this.
It's everything at the time,
That's
isn't it?
right.
You
I
know,
felt this
it's
pressure.
not just how much that cost. It's like,
no,
I have to succeed with this.
that's exactly right. And I didn't want to feel that I'd wasted something, because if I'd screwed that, if I'd left the wrong pin, because those pins are like, you apply heat to them and you'd hear them kind of squeak, and you're like, quick, lift it, but don't lift it too far, but you got to lift it enough, and don't lift the one next to it, but you got to leave the one on the other side down. Like, so much stress on myself to just not destroy this thing that's been on the earth since the day it was made. And I'm about to potentially make it redundant.
Yeah, you've got a certain responsibility, haven't you?
Absolutely. And, you know, like this, I really sort of, a lot of these sort of IPS for DMGs is they're a great thing, because you can take the original board out, put in a bag, write on it from the red, play it loud, shove it in the cupboard, slide the new one in, and everything's fantastic.
Yeah,
you haven't.
And I've got years behind me of modding these Game Boys, and sometimes the LCD would die, but I'm a hoarder and I put all these things in a drawer. So now it's like these Game Boys where I'd knackered up the screen, it's okay because I can take that part out, I can get the new IPS screen and drop it in, and now you can use them again.
Yeah.
So suddenly all these rear motherboards are becoming very valuable, where no one was really bothered before because it was all about the screen. Now you can have this new front board that you can buy. So it's like, right, okay, so all I need is a rear board, but the prices on these things now are just sky high. I mean, when I was first getting into modding, I had a policy. I would never pay more than £5 for a Game Boy.
Oh, goodness.
So I would scour eBay, buy faulty ones. And so those days are long gone.
Yeah.
And, you know, going around car boot sales and buying up all the cheap consoles. See, that was good. I used to be like really into car booting before mobile internet was a thing. So I would know my stuff. So I'd be able to go around and I'd be like, oh, Mega Drive, I'll get that.
Yeah.
Oh, and I know that game's quite rare. Oh, Streets of Rage 3, that's a really rare one. So I would know my stuff because I was really into it. Whereas now people do the research on the fly. They'll see a bunch of games, they'll look them up on eBay on their phone, and they'll buy the valuable ones. And that those kind of days of treasure hunting are behind us. But they were fun times.
But even the people selling
too much stuff anyway.
Even the people selling at the car boot sale, they kind of like,
oh yeah,
they know what they're doing
that's
now.
15 quid on eBay. Yeah.
It's like, but this isn't eBay. This is a paddock somewhere.
Yeah, that's it. It's like,
I just bought a sausage.
eBay,
like, come on, let's be real here. Yeah. All right, buddy. Well, look, I really do appreciate taking up nearly an hour and a half of your time.
Was it that long, really?
Yeah. It's your Saturday.
I enjoyed it, don't worry.
I really do appreciate you sort of taking the time out. Look, I really hope that we get to chat again sometime.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Yeah, I'm going to sort of see if I can find some of your tunes. I sort of feel like, unless I can hear tunes through a massive PA so it makes my hair stand up, I'm never quite going to understand, but I'm going to try. And I'm definitely going to go.
When the live shows all start up again, there's a festival in Australia called Square Sounds, and you can get yourself to that one.
Oh, okay. Is that a very specific kind of 8-bit
chiptune festival?
Okay, I'm gonna look that up too, just in case, because there's a lot of little things going on that, you know, like, say, for example, there's big comedy clubs that got shut down, but these comedians are still out in smaller venues that have got less restrictions because they're a smaller venue. So sometimes if you look at that, they'll be like, it'll link you to something and you can go, then there might not be a 150 person gig somewhere, but there might be 30 people meeting in a town hall or something somewhere. And
it's always worth trying to find out, isn't it?
Yeah. All right, dude. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Fantastic to meet you.
You too, thanks.
Really do appreciate your time, and we'll keep following and see what JoeBleeps comes up with next.
Yeah, you and me both.
All right, buddy.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Thanks, bud.
Bye.
Bye.